We all remember the story. It was one of the most emotional and triumphant moments in the history of Hollywood Task. The adoption of Robyn's 3 children from her first marriage, Dayton, Aurora, and Brianna. We watched Kody Brown step forward in what seemed to be the ultimate act of fatherly love. There were tears, courtroom scenes, and the sense of a family finally becoming whole. The official story was simple. Robyn's ex-husband, David Preston Jessup, was portrayed as distant and uncooperative. After some legal battles, he supposedly did the right thing and relinquished his parental rights so that Kody could become the children's legal father. It was shown as a story of love, unity, and redemption, a testament to Kody's devotion and the ideal of plural family harmony. But what if that story was a carefully constructed illusion? What if the foundation of this new, unified family wasn't love and sacrifice, but a secret financial deal funded by the very wives Kody was sidelining? To understand what really happened, we need to go back to that period. The Browns had just fled Utah, escaping possible prosecution for polygamy. They were starting over in Las Vegas, living in 4 rental homes on the same cul-de-sac. Money was tight. The stress was visible. Yet, amid that chaos, the family's new focus became making Robyn's family whole. The show framed the adoption as a moral mission. Robyn's kids already called Kody Dad, but legally they belonged to another man. The narrative was simple. This adoption was about giving those kids safety and legitimacy. We watched the emotional proposal scene, Kody kneeling before the children, asking if he could be their father forever. The children cried, Robyn cried, Kody cried. Even Mary made the ultimate sacrifice, divorcing Kody legally so that he could marry Robyn and make the adoption possible. It was portrayed as the selfless act of a woman devoted to the family's greater good. David Jessup, meanwhile, was painted as the villain. He was absent, difficult, and portrayed as a man who cared little about his children, yet was somehow still standing in the way. The show's story suggested that he refused to sign the papers, dragging out the process and causing immense stress for Robyn and her children. Then suddenly, the issue was resolved. The papers were signed. The family went to court. The judge approved the adoption, and the Browns emerged in tears of joy. Kody was the hero. Robyn was the grateful mother. And David Jessup faded into history. That was the story fans were told for years. It became the emotional core of Kody and Robyn's bond, the moment that proved his devotion. But according to later claims, that wasn't what really happened. The first whispers came years later on fan forums and commentary channels. Anonymous sources began hinting that the adoption was not as clean as TLC portrayed. These rumors gained momentum when a small YouTube channel landed an interview with a man named Daniel, a cousin of David Jessup. Daniel claimed he had been close to David during the adoption battle. His story directly contradicted everything the Browns and TLC had told viewers. According to Daniel, David was not an absent father. His contact with his kids might have been limited, but he cared for them deeply. He hadn't simply walked away. He was prepared to fight the adoption in court. But he was outmatched. Kody had fame, money, and a production company behind him. David was terrified that if he fought publicly, he'd be humiliated and destroyed financially. That's when Daniel said Kody took the fight off the books. According to him, Kody requested a private meeting with David. No lawyers, no cameras, no wives. Daniel said he drove his cousin to that meeting, which took place in a small diner somewhere between Las Vegas and southern Utah. There, Kody allegedly made an offer that would change everything. Daniel claimed Kody offered David around $75,000 in cash to give up his parental rights. The payment would be under the table. No paper trail, no banks, no records. The deal came with an NDA that would permanently silence David about the money, the adoption, or his relationship with the Browns. It was not just about signing away his rights. It was about buying silence forever. David, broken-cornered, agreed. He saw no other option. But that raised a disturbing question. Where did Kody get $75,000 in cash when the family was constantly complaining about financial hardship? The alleged answer came later from an investigative journalist who began digging into the Browns' financial records from that time. A source reportedly provided access to some of Janelle Brown's financial spreadsheets, the ones she used to manage the family's shared budget. Buried in those records was a massive, unexplained cash withdrawal, $80,000 taken from the family's main account just 3 days before the adoption hearing. It was labeled simply as legal and acquisition fees. That phrase was chilling. Legal could be explained, but acquisition? That was corporate language. You acquire property. You acquire assets. What exactly was the family acquiring? The journalist concluded that the Browns had used family money, the shared fund contributed by all 4 wives, to pay off David Jessup and finalize the adoption. If true, it meant that Kody had secretly used everyone's money, Mary's, Christine's, Janelle's, to buy legal custody of Robyn's children without their consent. That revelation reframed years of family conflict. Every time Kody denied one of the wives financial help, every time Christine was told there wasn't enough for her kids, every time Mary was left feeling alone and discarded, it all pointed back to that one transaction. The money had been there. It had just been redirected to serve Robyn's family. The alleged NDA would have made sure no one could ever expose the truth. Kody's move was not emotional or impulsive. It was a calculated business decision meant to permanently secure his preferred family while ensuring silence from everyone involved. Years later, when the truth began spreading online, it didn't stay hidden for long. The article and the cousins' interview circulated among the Brown children themselves. Someone shared the link in a family group chat with a simple message: "Has anyone seen this?" Skepticism turned to shock as they realized the story wasn't just rumor. It included details that matched real financial records. Soon, the older children organized a meeting. It wasn't a casual conversation, it was a confrontation. They gathered at Robyn's house, with Kody, Robyn, and the 3 original wives present, either in person or via video call. The air was tense. Logan, the eldest, began calmly but firmly. "Dad, we need to talk about the adoption." Kody bristled, immediately defensive. But before he could launch into a speech, another voice, perhaps Gwendolyn's, cut him off. She held up her phone, showing the article. "We're talking about this," she said. "We're talking about an $80,000 withdrawal labeled legal and acquisition fees. What does that mean, Dad?" The room went silent. The children demanded answers. Kody tried to deflect, accusing them of misunderstanding adult matters. But they pressed harder. Isabel, recalling how Christine had struggled to get funds for her scoliosis surgery, broke down. "You had money to pay off Robyn's ex, but not enough to help me walk without pain?" She cried. The accusations kept coming. "Where did the money come from?" Hunter asked. "Did you ask Mom? Did you ask any of them?" He gestured toward Janelle, Christine, and Mary. Then the spotlight turned to Robyn. "Did you know?" Aspen asked. Robyn broke down in tears, saying she didn't know the details, that Kody told her the money came from his own funds or show bonuses. She insisted she would never have agreed to take from the others. Finally, Kody erupted. "Yes, I gave him money," he shouted. "You call it a payoff, I call it protecting my family." That man was a threat. "I did what I had to do. I rescued those kids!" His justification only deepened the wound. Mary on the screen spoke in a cold voice. "I gave up my legal marriage for those kids. I did it for free because I thought it was the right thing. You took our money and turned it into a secret deal." Christine followed, her anger thick with years of resentment. "You told me we couldn't afford to move, couldn't afford my kids' needs. It wasn't that we didn't have money. It's that you already spent it on the family you really wanted." The confrontation ended in silence. One by one, the children began to leave. There were no dramatic goodbyes, just the quiet grief of realization. They hadn't come to fight anymore. They had come to witness the end of their father's myth. That night marked the true collapse of the Brown family. Christine's eventual departure, Janelle's separation, and Mary's final goodbye all made sense in light of this betrayal. The adoption wasn't the triumph of love. It was a business transaction, a hostile takeover of one family using the funds of another. Kody Brown didn't just adopt 3 children. He bought them, with money that didn't belong to him, and in doing so lost the love and trust of everyone else. The fairy tale the world believed was built on lies. And when the truth finally surfaced, it destroyed the empire he had spent decades pretending to build. They were burying the myth of their family, and there was nothing left to say. Each child that walked out the door was a vote, a final and irrevocable vote of no confidence in the man they once called their patriarch. Janelle stood frozen for a moment, her eyes locked on the space in her spreadsheet where the words legal and acquisition fees resided in her memory. She gave Kody a single unreadable look, a look that contained 25 years of partnership, trust, and now profound doubt. And then she too turned and left. The mothers on the screen, Mary and Christine, simply stared. There was no need for them to sign off. The meeting was over. The family offie as it had existed in any functional form was over. Finally, it was just Kody, Robyn, and her 3 children, standing alone in the cavernous living room, surrounded by the ghosts of the family they had just lost. And in that moment, the narrative of persecution that would define their future began to be written. "They don't understand," Robyn would whisper, tears finally streaming down her face. "They don't understand what we did for them." And Kody, his rage now calcifying into a righteous certainty, would wrap his arms around her and say, "They never will. It's us against the world now. It always has been." For Christine, the drive away from that house would have been one of surreal clarity. For years, she had felt a persistent, nagging sense of injustice, a feeling she often couldn't even articulate. She called it being the basement wife, a feeling of being consistently deprioritized, of her needs and her children's needs always coming last. She had blamed herself. She had blamed her own insecurities. She had blamed her jealousy. She had spent years in therapy trying to adjust her own attitude to fit the family structure. Now she understood. It wasn't in her head. It was on a ledger. Her feelings of being less than had a number attached to them, $80,000. Imagine her mind racing through a catalog of past slights. But now, with this new damning piece of information, every single financial struggle was recontextualized. The years they lived in the Leahy house with her, crammed into a small section of the house, with a growing brood of children while the family resources were being marshaled for the grand move to Las Vegas, the constant stress over grocery bills, school supplies, and basic necessities for her 6 kids. The arguments with Kody where he would dismiss her concerns as emotional or materialistic. It was all a lie. The money wasn't gone. It was just allocated elsewhere. It had been secretly earmarked for the acquisition of his new and improved family. The most searing memory, the one that would become the epicenter of her grief and rage, would be Isabel's surgery. She would replay every agonizing moment of that multi-year ordeal. The initial diagnosis, the search for doctors, Kody's initial resistance to the invasive surgery, pushing for less effective non-surgical options, his complaints about the cost, the insurance battles, the out-of-pocket expenses, and then Christine's desperate hustle, the luau sales, the online parties, the public fundraising that she had to do, essentially begging her social media followers to help pay for her daughter's essential medical care. It was humiliating, but she did it for her child. And then the final soul-crushing blow, Kody's refusal to travel with them to New Jersey for the surgery, a betrayal that Isabel cried over for months. He had the time to officiate a friend's wedding. He had the time to spend with Robyn and her kids, but he didn't have the time to be with his daughter during the most terrifying and painful experience of her life. Now, Christine could see it all through the lens of that secret payment. The $80,000 was not just a number. It was a choice. It was Kody years earlier making a decision. He had a large sum of family money at his disposal, and he chose to use it to buy out Robyn's ex-husband rather than putting it aside for the future, known needs of his existing 13 children. In his mind, securing Robyn's children was a better investment. It was a more urgent acquisition. The cruelty of that calculation is staggering. A father who would pay a fortune to erase one man's parental rights, but wouldn't pay for his own daughter's medical needs without a fight, is a father who is operating from a moral compass so broken it's unrecognizable. This revelation would be Christine's final permission slip to leave. Her marriage wasn't just failing. It had been a fraudulent enterprise from the start. She hadn't just been a wife. She had been an unwitting shareholder in a company that sold off her assets to fund a new venture, and she was finally ready to cash out her remaining stock and walk away. Janelle's reckoning would be quieter, but no less profound. If Christine's betrayal was emotional, Janelle's was structural. She was the chief financial officer of the Brown family. Her identity was wrapped up in being the logical, pragmatic, business-minded one. She managed the budgets. She tracked the expenses. She made the numbers work. She was Kody's buddy, his intellectual partner. The revelation of the $80,000 payment would be a direct assault on her entire role in the family. She was left with only 2 horrifying possibilities. Possibility 1, she knew. In this scenario, she was Kody's co-conspirator. She knew about the secret payment and helped him disguise it in the family budget. The entry, legal, and acquisition fees was her invention, a clever piece of corporate jargon to hide a dirty secret in plain sight. If this were true, it would make her complicit in the deception against her sister wives. It would mean that every time she had a rational discussion with Christine about budget shortfalls or told Mary they couldn't afford something, she was actively lying. This would make her a hypocrite of the highest order, the stoic bookkeeper who was secretly cooking the books for the CEO. It would explain her sometimes detached, almost clinical approach to the other wives' emotional complaints. She knew the game was rigged because she had helped design the rules. Possibility 2, which is perhaps even more devastating to her sense of Pell. She didn't know. Kody lied to her. He came to her and said, "I need $80,000 in cash for legal fees to finalize the adoption. Just put it down as legal and acquisition." In this scenario, she was not a conspirator. She was a fool, a dupe. He used her trust and her meticulous nature against her. He knew she wouldn't question a directive from the patriarch, especially if it was framed as a necessary legal expense. He exploited her desire for efficiency in order to push through his secret agenda. This would mean her entire partnership with Kody was a sham. He didn't see her as a respected equal, a financial partner. He saw her as a useful tool, a bookkeeper who could be easily manipulated. For a woman as proud, independent, and intelligent as Janelle, this would be an unforgivable insult. It would mean that her entire life's work of managing the family's finances, of making sacrifices and smart decisions, was all in service of a man who was playing a different game entirely. It would undermine her confidence, her past decisions, and her trust in her own judgment. The foundation of her pragmatic world would crumble, revealing that the numbers she had dedicated her life to managing were just props in Kody's personal drama. For Mary, the news would land like a final belated explanation for a decade of pain. Her story is perhaps the most tragic of all the wives. She was the first wife, the legal wife, the one who started it all with Kody. Her sacrifice of legally divorcing Kody so he could marry Robyn was the central noble act that enabled the adoption to happen. The show portrayed it as the ultimate testament to her commitment to the principle of plural marriage. She was putting the family's needs above her own. The pain of that decision, the loss of her legal status, was immense. And what followed was a decade of Kody systematically dismantling their relationship, emotionally abandoning her, and leaving her in a marital no-man's land. Her loneliness and isolation directly led to the catfishing scandal, an event from which her relationship with Kody and the rest of the family never truly recovered. Now, with the revelation of the secret payment, her sacrifice is revealed in a horrifying new light. It wasn't a noble act that the family collectively benefited from. It was simply the last procedural step required to close Kody's private business deal. She wasn't a martyr for the family. She was an unwitting pawn on Kody's chessboard. He needed her legal status out of the way so he could complete a transaction he was funding with her own money. The injustice is dizzying. He used her loyalty to get what he wanted and then discarded her once she was no longer useful to his primary goal, securing his new life with Robyn. The $80,000 becomes a symbol of everything that was taken from her. While she was grappling with the emotional and social fallout of her divorce, while she was spiraling into a loneliness so profound that she sought comfort from a stranger online, Kody was flushed with the success of his secret, expensive victory. He didn't just move on from her, he cashed her out. He took her legal standing, her financial contributions, and her emotional loyalty, and he liquidated them to purchase the family he truly desired. This revelation would not bring Mary closure, but a cold, hard, and liberating rage. It would finally allow her to see that the failure of her marriage was not her fault. It wasn't because she was too difficult or because of the catfishing scandal. The marriage was over long before that. It was over the day Kody decided to make a secret investment in another woman's family, using Mary's own assets to do it. While the original wives were processing this ultimate betrayal, and